Greetings, nature nerds, and welcome back to Ask an Ecologist. Thank you so much. My name is Suzanne Simpson, and I'm an ecologist for Bayou Land Conservancy, and I am joined this week by a very special guest who is my dog, hello, Hyla, who's named after my favorite genus of tree frog. She is a 2-year-old rescue beagle basset mix, and she comes along with me with during a lot of my outdoor adventures. But she's here today because we are going to be talking about a very important subject related to what comes out of her backside. So tune in for that in just a couple of minutes. First, before we get to that, I wanted to say a round of applause and a big thank you to my cohort, the illustrious Becky Martinez, for taking over for me last week on Ask an Ecologist while I was gallivanting in the Rockies. She came to you straight from the mountains of Albuquerque and did an awesome job. So applause and snaps for Becky. Now, before I get into our main topics, I wanted to address something really briefly that's just popped into the news in the past couple of days. I won't address it at length because it's still a little bit of a developing story, but suffice it to say, if you get seeds in your mailbox that you did not order or ask for, it is a good idea to follow the direction of our agricultural commissioner and not plant them. So again, don't plant any seeds that you didn't order in your mailbox. We'll see if we'll have more on that topic in the coming weeks. Okay, so let's move on to the importance of cleaning up after your best friend. So, almost all of Houston's waterways experience an unhealthy level of fecal coliform bacteria. And one common source of that bacteria comes from the backside of our best friends, and that is pet waste. We've all seen it. Abandoned piles of pet poop on sidewalks and in the woods on trails is enough to whip your next door forum into quite a frenzy, along with fireworks on the 5th of July. But there's more to having dog poop in your neighborhood than getting your shoes smelly. So why is it so important for us to pick up after man's best friend? And is there a better option available? We are going to take a deep dive into a big pile of, well, you know. So first of all, pet waste is far from the only source of bacterial contamination that we get in our waterways, but it is a source that me and you and your neighbor and your best friend can most likely do something about. And I'm all about focusing this program on the little things that you can do every day to have a more healthy environment in and around you. So that's why we're going to focus on pet waste specifically during this program. Now, when pet waste is left on the ground, be it a concrete sidewalk or the grass in a park or the woods along a trail, rainwater is going to wash that poop downstream into our rivers, creeks, and bayous. And the decomposition of animal waste sucks up really, really precious oxygen that fish and other marine life need to subsist. And so we could result in decreases in your marine life, could even result in fish kills in some of our bayous and water systems. It also contaminates the waterways that we recreate in and ultimately where we get our drinking water. We have a lot of water treatment plants in the Houston area, and part of the reason is we don't want to drink water that's contaminated with fecal coliform bacteria. So whenever you're you're shedding a lot. Whenever you're not picking up after your dog poop and the poop's going downstream, it ends up costing us more to filter our water and make it healthy for us to drink. Now, there are a couple of different options of how you can rid yourself of dog poop, but the best option as urban, suburban dwellers is to just bag it up very securely and throw it out in an appropriate garbage can. Individual composters can't be reliably heated to where the temperatures are hot enough to where you can compost your dog poop safely and then, put it back in your garden. As of now, that would be a great way to contaminate your edible gardens out in the back. Now, there are commercial composters that are available that can compost pet waste, and that includes both dog waste and cat waste. Cat waste is a little bit trickier because of the viruses that are still present in cat waste, but there are pilot programs in cities like Portland and San Francisco that are picking up people's pet waste and then taking it to commercial composters, converting into something that is usable and into energy. And so maybe in the mid to long term future, we'll see more programs like that emerge, which would be really cool. And our pets' waste will turn into something that's really useful for us as a community. So until that happens, let's make sure that we're cleaning up after our pets. If they poop, bend down and scoop. It's not hard, and especially if you're in an area, a wildland area, where you're thinking, well, this doesn't really matter because I'm out in the backcountry. Be sure you're bringing extra bags with you. I always, if I'm hiking with Hyla, she carries her own water, and I can also just unzip the pocket and put her poop in there too. So she carries everything in and she takes everything out. She follows leave no trace principles. So consider doing that in and around your house and when you're going out into the backcountry. All right, so let's get to your questions. Our question for this week comes from Steve and Sandy Lentz, and they asked me, we have found many burrows in our front and back lawns, probably moles. How dense can these burrows or populations be? So Steve and Sandy sent me pictures of the burrows that they found, and I can't say for certain based on the pictures whether you do have a mole or not. Usually moles will leave some sort of excess dirt on the surface. That's why they call it a molehill. And I couldn't tell if you guys had that. But for the sake of the question, let's go ahead and talk about moles because they are present in our area of Texas. So we have one species of mole in Texas that's known as the eastern mole. And it occupies the eastern half of the state. Almost if you cut Texas in half, the eastern moles are on the eastern half of the state. And for me, moles qualify under the so ugly they're cute category, right next to the possum. So moles expend an enormous amount of energy to make the burrows that you see in your back lawns. And because of that, they have to eat 70 to 100% of their body weight every day. I know you wish that you could eat that much of your body weight every day. Me too, I get it. That means they'll only occupy soil that is rich with invertebrates like earthworms. And incidentally, that also means that you may have a really nice garden growing if you have a lot of rich invertebrates in your soil. So good on you. But that also means that because they need so much food, their population density is far less than you might imagine. In spite of them being a relatively small animal, they need so many resources to sustain themselves every single day that they tend to be more spread out. So 3 to 5 moles per acre is actually a pretty dense population. So what you're seeing in your yard may be the result of only 1 or 2 moles, possibly. Now, most of the time, moles and humans can coexist alongside one another. The damage in most cases is aesthetic. You know, you see the little molehills on the top of your lawn, and that can bother some people, but it's usually not particularly damaging to one's garden. After all, you don't want to make mountains out of molehills. But if your garden is sustaining repeated damage, especially in like a specific area where you're maybe growing vegetables, you could install a buried sheet of metal around that area in order to try and keep the moles out and have them be in areas that are maybe a little bit nicer for you to have them in. So yeah, I think it's great that you guys are seeing that activity. If you ever see a mole, please do send me a picture. And I mean the mole, the animal, not the mole that, yeah. But I will say that, you know, I've mentioned before on this program that I'm a herpetologist, and that means that my favorite critters in the world are reptiles and amphibians. And so one of the ways that I search for reptiles and amphibians is I'll look at deadfall on the ground and I'll roll it over to see if maybe there's a snake or a frog underneath of it. But I will say that the coolest thing I've ever found underneath a log is a family of moles that were living there. So it was the mom and her babies that were totally hairless at the time. They were newborns, and it was a really, really amazing find. I could not believe that I had rolled that over. So moles are super cool, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk about them a little bit. All right, so that wraps it up for this week. Great to be back. Remember that you can submit your questions by leaving us a comment. You can send us an email at info@bayouland.org, and I'll see you next week to talk about more ecology.